Welcome to Texas A&M's Virtual Campus Sustainability Month for 2021. Happy to have you here with us today. So today we have a really interesting talk about houseplants, and really the conversation kind of revolves around, during the COVID-19 pandemic, we've been stuck inside a lot more than ever before, and a lot of people have kind of coped by buying a lot of houseplants, which I think is wonderful to have more nature in our houses. But there's another kind of side of this to consider. So that's what our students today are going to be talking to us about. Sylvia and Jaedyn will be talking to us about houseplants. And they've got a very creative presentation where they've incorporated some Pokemon stuff. So hopefully it'll be very entertaining and enjoyable for all to check that out. So before we get to their presentation, I just want to go over a few pieces of information. So first, let's click on the wrong thing here. First, what I would recommend is that in your view, if you look at this video kind of by my face here, if you're watching the screen, you can change it into side-by-side mode. It's a much better way to view the presentation. You can see the whole presentation plus the presenter speaking at the same time. I've enabled the live transcript, so if you prefer to view the presentation that way, please feel free to do that. Questions are always great. That helps us at the end with our discussion. So if you do have any questions that you'd like to ask our presenters, please put those in the chat. You can also unmute yourself at the very end and engage with us in that way. Also, the session is being recorded, so just be aware of that. And it will be available on our YouTube page after. And you may also be here because you've heard we're giving away prizes. We have some pretty cool prizes that we're giving away, and you get those prizes by collecting code words. So you earn those points by getting those code words that we'll have during this presentation. One code word equals 1 point, and then you can use each point is worth 1 entry into our random draw giveaway. And the code words will be written on a PowerPoint slide. They will be spoken, or they will be written in the chat. So just kind of pay attention over the course of this presentation, and keep track of your code words and just send them all in just one email at the conclusion of Campus Sustainability Month. All the words you've collected, whatever those may be, put those in one email to sustainability@tamu.edu. And you have all the way until October 31st, Halloween, 11:59 p.m. to get those code words to us. And you can earn up to 5 code words per event when you watch live. If you watch recorded, you only get 1. You can also participate through Maroonbase. This is a separate app on campus where you can actually earn cash prizes. So you can get points towards Maroonbase as well. Just log in and you can find those in there. And then complete prize rules and details are here on our webpage. Just go to sustainability.tamu.edu. Here's the specific web address if you need it. And the prizes, what are they? Well, we got some good ones. You can get a Yeti cooler. You can get a GoPro Hero 8. Those are choices for the grand prize. You can choose between the two. And then runner-ups are going to get a Patagonia quarter zip pullover. And then just for participating, you can get code words. If you collect 2, you get a water bottle. 3, you get one of our awesome vintage t-shirts. You collect 5, you can get both. So, I mean, hey, double up. So with that, that's everything I want to go over. I'm going to pass it over to Jaedyn and Sylvia. They're going to take it away from there. Whenever you're ready, ladies.
Yeah, I'm having a slight issue, so it'll be like a second. I don't know what happened, but I'll be right back.
Just wait on Sylvia and just a second. All right, well, since Sylvia is working on something right now, I'm going over the first part of this presentation anyway. So hi, my name is Jaedyn Medrano. I am a senior renewable natural resources major. And then Sylvia, her name is Sylvia Wegwu. She's a junior public health major. And she's also an artist, and her art is featured throughout this presentation. So this is just our little table of houseplants. I kind of want to go over content of what is in this so that y'all can understand a little bit better, like what we're going to be talking about and why when I talk about some things, it's going to connect to something else. So I'm going to start off with the pandemic. And then we're going to talk about mental health and just the general concept of quarantine, what the term biophilia means, and then also social media and how that connects to houseplants and the pandemic. And then we're also going to be talking about invasive and introduced species, kind of the difference between those two and why those can be bad, just plant nurseries, the general concept of plant poaching, which is something that I didn't even know was a thing, and then the economy, and then the world's wetlands. So if it would.
Brought you frankincense. Thank you.
Okay. So I wanted to clarify before I go into the next slide, there's going to be a little bit of audio, so it doesn't scare anybody.
Brought you frankincense. Thank you. And I brought you myrrh. Thank you. Murder. Judas.
So obviously, everybody knows we've been going through the COVID-19 pandemic. That was just like a fun little relevant sound that I thought was interesting for the presentation. The COVID-19 pandemic is something that we've all been going through. It wasn't super great. And because of that, we've been going through this for so long, still ongoing in it. Mental health has been kind of bad. And then, of course, life does not stop for the pandemic at all. We've been having a lot of stuff going on. I wrote out a really long list of everything that was wrong over the last 2 years, and that was really depressing. So some of the highlights are just that we've been experiencing numerous wars. We've had a lot of protests, a lot of political tension. We've had a lot of climate change-induced disasters, such as fires, hurricanes, floods, things like that. And then also just the virus and the amount of lives that it's taken, and then also the Delta variant, it hasn't been super great. So just to set the premise for the rest of the presentation, we're going into this looking at the scope of poor mental health. And so these are everything that I just discussed. I think it's really interesting to think about like how the pandemic has altered our just mental health habits. Hello, Sylvia. I introduced you. Started to go in. And then just quarantine. Whenever I was researching this topic, it was really interesting to hear about these studies where they've done effects, or they researched the effects of quarantine on people and their habits, and they were all found to, like, everybody was found to have increased anxiety, tiredness, stress, etc. And mental health diagnoses were, like, poor mental health diagnoses were becoming more and more frequent, especially people self-diagnosing. And they were doing studies on people who had green fixtures in their house or near them. And a green fixture is basically like either a plant or some kind of garden or a patio garden, or being able to access a park or being able to even see a park. And there was a correlation between people's mental health and just having a houseplant. So biophilia is the innate human instinct to connect with nature and other living beings. I want to connect this to the concept of the pandemic, because in those studies, they found that people who had houseplants and or succulents or anything really green that better connected them to nature, they felt less alone and or they had more positive mental health. If they did exhibit symptoms of the pandemic being really bad, they were less aggravated. Now, this wasn't consistent across the board because not everybody is a plant person, but generally they found that people who had green fixtures and or houseplants were doing a bit better. And so, yeah, myself, I grew quite a collection of plants over the course of the pandemic. And so we put together a little interactive poll activity. I don't know if y'all heard it, but we're basing it off like the old Pokemon show where it's like the Who's That Pokemon. So y'all are gonna get a chance to see what this is. I think on y'all's end, you should be seeing the poll. I just launched it. All right. I think everybody that's going to participated. So overwhelmingly, I think y'all can see the results. I'm not sure how it shows up on my screen. This is what shows up on my screen. Y'all said aloe vera. No, it is not an agave plant. It is aloe vera. And then the fun fact that we found about aloe vera was that in ancient historical times, the Greeks thought that the aloe vera plant could be used to solve baldness. So yeah, maybe I should give some to my dad. And so now we want to talk about social media and the role in Planned Parenthood. Going into the pandemic, having a space that was very planty, urbanized, that whole aesthetic was becoming really relevant and popular in pop culture again, but it just kind of was exacerbated by the pandemic because you saw all these influencers who were creating content. They were stuck in their homes, they had lots of plants. They were creating videos about just like general plant walkthroughs, how to care for your plant, things like that, just the different ones that they had. And they were able to basically make a living off of talking about this. And so, you know, I don't think anybody intended for this to become such a big thing, but this hashtag Planned Parenthood, and then also hashtag Plants of TikTok and hashtag Plant Mom all have over 2 million post tags with these hashtags. I'm pretty sure hashtag Plant Mom has the most. I think that one's approaching 3 million, but it's really, really popular. And the code word for our presentation is Jessie. You know, because Jessie, we also have Jessie in our office. She's our sustainability coordinator. She's pretty cool. So if y'all have that written down, next slide. We have our next one. And then I'm going to put up the poll in just a second. Oh no, I moved it over here. Hang on, y'all, just a sec. Sorry. Y'all should be seeing the second poll. All right. Okay, more people to participating this time. I appreciate it. All right, I think I'm gonna close this. And then overwhelmingly, you all said fishbone cactus. I don't want you to do it again. It is a fishbone cactus. I know I've been talking about it with a few of my friends. All right.
Okay, so in connection to the rise in popularity in houseplants, as we were talking about with social media and all of that, we're going to talk about how corporations have taken advantage of that and used it, you know, to further their I guess to capitalize on their goals. So large plant companies have decided to take the opportunity to capitalize on this and create gigantic nurseries that function like factories. They've used this and they go through enormous amounts of fertilizer, water, soil, and electricity while raising these plants, which, you know, is good for the plants, but it's not the best for the planet. They also have really big, wide, complex shipping networks, and that's not good. It releases a lot of carbon emissions. A single person releases a lot of carbon emissions. So you can imagine what an entire company just full of people going back and forth constantly would do. So we have some specific examples in companies. These include Bell Nursery, Metrolina Greenhouses, and Costa Farms. We're going to hone in on Costa Farms right now because they've mass produced this plant called the Chinese money plant or Chinese money plant or Pilia sharing plant. And it used to be extremely difficult to get a hold of it, and they used to cost $50 per plant. But now they're really cheap. You can buy them for $5 each. Now you're probably thinking, Sylvia, that's cool. Cheap plants are really cool. I love plants, and I love when they're cheap. But it's not cool. It's not cool, and I'll explain to you why in a few slides. But first, another who's that plant? You know, get your guesses in.
I think everybody should be able to get this one. No, okay. All right, I think everybody's gone. It's gonna do it. All right, so our results, y'all said Swiss cheese plant. Let's see, what is it?
That's right.
It's a Swiss cheese plant, also commonly known as a monstera. And then the fun fact about this one, I forgot the fun fact last time, it's that Monstera plants have muscles, so you can't really see it under the leaf, but there's like between the node where the leaf grows, the plant has a muscle, and that's how it like helps sustain the really big or the flimsy leaves on the stalk. I don't know, I just thought it was interesting that a plant could have a muscle.
Okay, so now I'm going to talk about a specific kind of case study of what can happen. This relates to poachers, plants. And so, as I've said before, succulents and other houseplants have significantly risen in popularity due to increased consumer demand. Because of this, legal trade and also the black market trade of succulents have seen a really big increase. This is called Dudleya farinosa. It's also known as bluff lettuce, and it's native to California. Well, I'll get to that in a second, but it's seen a lot of demand in East Asia. And as one South Korean plant nursery owner put it, specifically, it's seen a lot of demand in East Asia, more specifically Korea, South Korea, and China. Chinese demand wasn't until recently, and because of this, because China has a very large population, it's hard to sustain. But one South Korean plant nursery owner said, before Chinese people started to grow succulents, online markets would sell about 1,000 to 2,000 plants of a popular species. But after Chinese customers started buying, even tens of thousands of plants would not meet the demand. It's very unsustainable, which, of course, is an issue. A lot of media, if you ever look up something about the succulent trade, they'll say that the demand is mostly due to quote unquote hipsters and housewives, but it's significantly more complex in reality. There's this 2020 study from the University of Alabama, and it postulated that the increase in poaching was not due to hipsters and housewives and, just mainstream plant consumers at large, but instead due to a more specialized group of high-level plant enthusiasts. Demand among the average plant owner isn't particularly high because this plant, Dudleya farinosa, is very hard to take care of, and generally people who keep them in greenhouses. This was corroborated by commercial succulent dealers in South Korea and California, who claimed that most of their legally acquired bluff lettuce went to advanced succulent owners with the funds to maintain their own greenhouses. Now, given all of this information, what are the consequences of poaching houseplants, you may wonder? Well, I'll get to that in a second. Okay, so now we're going to talk about invasive species and how it relates to houseplants. What is an invasive species? You're probably wondering, maybe. Invasive species are species that are not native to the area, and they can be let loose for one reason or another, and they outcompete the native population, which isn't a good thing. You can see that this isn't a house plant, but kudzu was a thing. Sometimes you see it growing on light posts. They brought it over to feed to cows, if I recall correctly, and the cows didn't want it, so it just spread everywhere. But yeah, invasive species are harmful to the environment because they outcompete. This causes issues with ecosystem service functions for areas and decreases biodiversity overall. Proper care of succulents and other assorted houseplants must be given to ensure that they do not spread and become invasive, especially with the ones with like long vines and stuff that can easily go from your pot to the grass. That's not a good thing. Okay.
Something I forgot to include in here. The difference between an invasive and an introduced species is a introduced species is something that was specifically brought here, planted. It's usually really ornamental. A lot of people will put stuff in their front yard, but then it does really, really well and it outcompetes and it starts growing in the wild, and then it becomes an invasive species, which is what we mean by you need to be really careful by what you plant.
Yeah.
So on to another Who's That Houseplant? We were trying to be funny when we came up with the answer choices for all these. All right. Are we gonna get one more? No? Okay. In the pool, y'all were tied between hens and chicks and rosium. I didn't know hens and chicks was a real plant. So what is it? It's rosium. I think this is like one of the most common images or like shapes for a succulent you can see, kind of in the shape of a rosebud or the way a rose will open up.
Yeah, the fun fact about rosium is that sedum plants or sedum plants at large are recommended for green roofs, which are roofs that have plants on them, due to their hardy, low maintenance nature. Okay, so now we're going to talk about loss of income for local economies. Okay, so this is relating to that slide I was talking about previously, the two things, the large corporations and the thing with that plant being available for cheap. You know, it's good for the consumer, it's bad for local economies. Okay, so because of the size and scale of these big factories that I was talking about before, they're able to outcompete a lot of local smaller plant nurseries and shops. They can provide larger and more advanced specimens of a variety of species at a low cost. And this drives consumers to purchase these plants from these big stores like Lowe's, H-E-B, Home Depot, Walmart, instead of the smaller nurseries. This takes business away from small nurseries and stuff like that. And it also places a kind of monopoly or oligopoly on specific plant species. Some areas of the US, if a large nursery decides to start carrying a specific species, oftentimes small nurseries just stop carrying it to avoid being outcompeted, I guess, taking themselves out of the cycle. This makes it extremely difficult to maintain a strong and circular economy. Nowadays, it's hard to buy plants that aren't peat or factory grown, and that relates to the next slide after this.
But first, another Who's That Pokemon.
Hooray!
We try to space these out a little bit.
What could it be?
I think this might be the easiest one, honestly. Oh. All right, 12. Okay. Oh, we had 13 that time. All right, gonna share the results. Y'all overwhelmingly said snake plant. I appreciate the person who clicked on what is pretty obviously the wrong answer. It's the snake plant. And then I thought something that was really interesting is that the fibers of this plant they're like used to make bowstrings. Like I don't think it's like commercially used to make bowstrings, but they can be used to make bowstrings, like on bow and arrows, so you can shoot people. Perhaps shoot people who are poaching your plants.
Okay, so I mentioned peat-grown plants. I did mention it kind of quickly and offhandedly, so you may not have heard me, but I mentioned it. Okay, so peat is a substance. It's taken from like the ground of wetlands, basically, and it's used to grow plants. A peat bog specifically is a wetland environment filled with peat. And, you know, you may think, oh, you know, it's just moss. What's so bad about it? But despite it being, you know, nutrient rich and good for plants, it's also not the best thing to be taking away from these wetlands, as it'll ruin them, basically make them not wetlands. So wetlands are really important to our planet because they're places with high biodiversity, natural resources, and they act as carbon sinks. So basically they absorb all this extra carbon that's just there. If you get rid of them, a bunch of carbon will be released, and that's not necessarily a good thing because we're already releasing a lot of carbon just by driving, you know, electricity, all sorts of ways. So they're really crucial points of power in the battle against climate change. And so we have to try and protect them, whether through legislation or other means.
One final Who's That Pokemon. This one's my favorite plant. Oh, y'all are good. Okay. Do I see number 13? Oh, yeah, we got to 13. Any more? No? Okay. All right, so y'all overwhelmingly said string the pearls. Got a few. No string of buttons, unfortunately. And it is the string of pearls. All right, so in this slide, we just kind of wanted to talk about what you can do. A little of these pictures are funny, but basically we just want to promote that you keep your plants in safe spaces if they can be something that's really invasive, which is, you know, why that thing is on a leash, just to make sure that we're not out competing indigenous Texas species. Also just making sure you're trying to buy local, making sure that you're buying plants that are like pretty resilient and aren't just going to die, so that, you know, you don't, you know, feed into capitalism by wasting money on plants, but also just like supporting the area. Sylvia, did you have anything to add on this slide?
Oh, I mean, I did put some native species. Unfortunately, I didn't put names, but look at these nice little native species that you could use you could grow them for funsies instead of growing succulents from other places. Or these aren't succulents, but just
Or you
plants.
can propagate your succulents.
Yeah, that's true.
We should have included a how-to on how to propagate. And then for College Station, at least, these are the names of some places in the area that you can purchase plants from. Unfortunately, I don't think there's any nurseries in this area that actually ethically produce plants. So a lot of these companies source them from the big plant nurseries, but you can at least support a small business. I think it's really interesting that this Buds Plant Co. one is like it's kind of like a TAMU student-run shop that specifically contributes all their funds to another organization on campus called Active Minds, which focuses on mental health and just reducing stigma, suicide awareness, things like that. So really cool student-run company to buy plants from. And here are our sources. And then if anybody plays Pokemon Go, these are our teams,
Oh yeah.
Sylvia's Mystic. I'm Instinct. She really didn't like this slide. And then here's some of the art credits. This is what we took because we didn't have time to draw it. And then Armin, and then Sylvia drew all this. So if anybody has any questions about the content of our presentation, please let us know. There's one more slide.
All right, thank you so much, ladies. That was great. Especially just want to shout out the art. We don't often see our students put that kind of an effort in creating the art for their PowerPoint. So I thought that was really cool. I see Jaedyn also threw in some Photoshop skills as well. So lots of artwork to go around. But yeah, really cool drawing, Sylvia. Really interesting presentation. I think visually it was really fun to watch, really fun to be a part of. So I think that was really cool. Also, a really interesting topic as well. So I have a couple questions. Hopefully y'all have some questions as well. Oh, I just realized I do owe you guys the rest of the code words. I just popped those in the chat right now, just making sure you saw the whole presentation before I put those in there, but those are there. So what I'm gonna do real quickly is I'm gonna just pull up my screen here. I just wanna go over a couple things with you. And while I'm doing that, please, if you have any questions, you can think of them now. I just wanted to quickly let you know that the next presentation that we're going to have is tomorrow. It'll be at noon. It's going to be from Nick Baeto, and he's going to be talking to you about sustainable investing. So I think it's a really interesting, useful presentation. It's even if you don't want to, even if sustainable investing isn't something you're interested in, just learning how to invest your money, especially if we have a lot of college kids on the call, you want to do this now. The younger you start, the better. He's going to kind of give you the basics of how to invest, but then if you want to invest your money in more sustainable causes, feel a little bit better about where your money's going, he's going to teach you some avenues to do that as well. So definitely recommend checking out his presentation tomorrow at noon. And then the other thing I wanted to just let you know about is we do have an internship program. So Sylvia and Jaedyn are interns here. If you want to be really awesome like them, you can apply for our next semester. And we're going to have those applications open on November 8th, and they'll close on, November 8th, and they'll close on November 22nd. So that's what we have coming up. And with that, I just want to get back to the Q&A. Let me just check and see if we have any questions in the chat. A lot of people are saying it was amazing. I loved how informative and interactive it was. Awesome job. I love the artwork. Learned lots of names of plants today, so that's a good. Someone said no grapevines in this presentation today, Grandpa. That was Jaedyn, I guess. So maybe one in the future. So not any questions so far. I have a really softball question for y'all. Usually I throw y'all tough ones, but for this one it's easier. What is your favorite plant and why? And I think Jaedyn may have already spilled the beans on that question, but what is your favorite plant and why?
Oh, well, I mean, I said the string of pearls. I really like that one just because the look of it, and I like plants that are hanging plants. I can't actually hang any plants where I live right now because I can't drill holes in walls, but I really like the thought of just being able to see something grow, and it makes me think of vines in the forest. So I like that. I also like the fishbone cactus. It doesn't kind of exactly look how it does in real life, but it's a very squiggly plant, and you wouldn't think it looks like a cactus. So I like that one too.
Okay, well, I don't really grow plants very often, but there's this type of flower that I like called a gentian, I think, or gentian, and it's this really brilliant blue color. The type I like is specific to Europe, which is not, I mean, they're not local plants, which is unfortunate, but I do like how they look. They're very pretty. So yeah, that's mine.
Awesome. And it looks like someone has written in the comments that they've had several friends who've had their succulents stolen from their yards. They like the desert rose. So kind of like that poaching thing you were talking about, Sylvia, it can happen in just the people's yards, apparently. So that's interesting. All right, so I guess you kind of already talked to us a little bit about like how do we, obviously it's like kind of a challenging situation, right? Because we want to have those houseplants inside, it's good for our mental health, but we know that it's not necessarily great for the environment. You talked a little bit about how do you have sustainable plants already, but I think one thing you mentioned was propagating your plants. So I think that's kind of a more affordable way. Let's say you have a plant in your house already and you could propagate it. What does that like? What does that mean? I guess could you talk about that just a little bit more? And I think that'll be our last question, just based on the time.
Okay. When it comes to succulents, at least most of them, it kind of just happens naturally. But when their leaves fall off, you can take them. What you should do is you should just kind of leave them out to dry somewhere on soil for a few days and leave them alone. And then I just kind of mist mine like once a week, and then they start growing these little pink roots. And when you see the little pink roots growing, you know that you're going to be fine. You just kind of leave it there and it's going to grow. It's going to bud with a flower, and that original leaf is probably going to shrivel up. It really just depends on the type of plant, because some of them do, some of them don't. And it's going to be a slow process, but it just slowly but surely grows into a bigger plant. And then it really depends on when you get into like bigger leafier house plants, the type of plant that it is. Like there's different ways you can do it with like Monstera. I've seen done, you can do it in water, you can just do it in soil, or they have these, I think they're called pelopods. Basically, it's a super nutrient packed little pod that you stick the plant cutting in, and it helps it grow really fast. But it's a pretty easy way to just kind of expand your plant collection, and or if you wanted to give someone to someone else, a pretty good way to go about that. Yeah, that's how propagating works.
Awesome. Sylvia, I don't know if you want to add on to that or not. You don't have to, but
No, yeah,
no. She covered it. All right, cool. So yeah, I think that's just a really cool way. Whereas like maybe if you've already had a plant and you've learned about this, and maybe you shouldn't necessarily buy more from these big box retailers, but you can just take your current plant and make more, and you can keep making more plants. So I think that's pretty cool. Just make sure it's not invasive and it goes outside, right, Sylvia? All right, cool. Awesome. All right, well, that is going to wrap up our presentation for today. Thank you, Sylvia and Jaedyn. Great work, ladies. And we hope to see you all tomorrow at noon to learn about sustainable investing. So I hope everyone has a great rest of your Monday. Take care, everyone.